there! Most of you watching are right-handed, meaning you prefer activities such as writing and throwing with your right hand. But a smaller percentage of you, roughly 10%, are left-handed, meaning you prefer to do tasks such as writing or throwing with your left hand. And even a smaller percentage of you are ambidextrous, meaning you can carry out activities such as writing with both hands and throwing with both hands. But a smaller percentage are mixed-handed, meaning you can do some activities with your right hand and some with your left hand. For instance, maybe I can write with my left hand and throw with my right hand. But why is this? What is the difference between a left-handed person's brain and a right-handed person's brain? And moreover, why is being left-handed a lot more rare? And why is being ambidextrous almost non-existent? And moreover, are left-handed people better at some stuff? And can they do certain things better than right-handed people can? Alright, now if you can, you should try and do something. First, lift your right leg up, and then start rotating it in a clockwise motion. Like this, that's pretty easy. But now take your right hand and start rotating it in a counterclockwise motion. It's possible, but don't get me wrong, it's pretty hard. Now, try and do this. Raise your left leg up, and then rotate that in a clockwise motion, and then rotate your right arm in a counterclockwise motion. It's pretty easy, right? But it's harder to do it on one side. Now, if you want a harder challenge, try doing this. Same thing, right leg up, clockwise motion, and then try and draw a 6 with your right hand. Your right leg will want to go in the same direction as your right hand. But why is it so hard? Well, the reason is that the right side of our brain controls the left side of our body, and the left side of our brain controls the right side. So that's why, for say, moving your right arm and your left leg is so easy, because right brain has control of one side, left brain also has control of the other side. You're using two parts of your brain. But when we use only one side, when we rotate our right leg in a clockwise motion and rotate our right hand in counterclockwise motion, we're only using one hemisphere of our brain. Hence, our brain has to multitask, and that's not as easy. Alright, now try and do something. Try writing with your non-dominant hand. For most of you, that'll be your left hand. And if you try it, right, it's a pretty hard task. For 10% of you, that'll be your right hand. And same thing, that isn't easy. But about 1% of you won't have a problem because you're ambidextrous and you don't have a dominant hand. So if I try and write with a non-dominant hand, it just looks like scribbles. So this raises the question, if we have a dominant ear, a dominant eye, a dominant hand, and even a dominant leg, do we have a dominant brain hemisphere? Well, surprisingly, no, we don't have a dominant brain hemisphere. And you're probably understandably confused like I was when I was researching this subject. I always thought that hand dominance was determined by the dominance of your brain hemisphere, but if each brain hemisphere gets used equally as much, then what determines hand dominance? A study was done in 2013 to answer the question of brain dominance and how much of each hemisphere we use. There were 1,000 candidates, and each person was ranged between age, ethnicity, and despite the complex data analysis that went into studying all 1,000 people, the results showed that everyone uses their brain about equally as much unless one side of the brain is damaged. So, if brain dominance doesn't cause hand dominance, then what does? And still, why are left-handed people a lot more rare? Does location matter? And what I mean by this is, does different brain locations correlate to different body functions? And the answer to this is yes. Different parts of the brain control different functions. For instance, we know this because people who have had brain damage lack skills in some areas. For instance, take Phineas Gage. He was the guy that got a metal pole shot through his head, part of his brain was taken out, and he lived. And after the incident happened, he experienced uncontrollable madness. He was angry all the time and people described him as aggressive, and that was because part of the brain that regulated emotion was damaged for him. For instance, the Wernicke's area and the Broca's area, which are located in the left hemisphere, correlate to language. So if somebody got their left brain hemisphere injured, that might correlate in losing language abilities. The right area controls emotion, so like in Phineas's case, getting his right hemisphere damaged ultimately did a disservice to controlling emotions. But I'm kind of confused right now, as you probably are as well. If we have hand dominance, why don't we have brain dominance? Because for a very long time, hand dominance was just to be determined by brain dominance. So if brain dominance doesn't exist, but hand dominance does, then what's going on? Many parts of the brain control movement. The cerebellum is one, but it's only one of many that control movement in the body. So instead of looking at brain dominance to solve the mystery of hand dominance, let's look at what part of the brain controls movement. For the majority of the population, skills such as writing and throwing are placed on the left side of the brain. And we know that location matters, so because of this, the right side is going to take control. Now, of course, the right side of the brain isn't in charge of all the movement your body does. Needless to say, your right side also has movement, so that's why you can still move your left hand, just not as well. But in this case, why is not everyone right-handed? There is a phenomenon where babies, when they are born, the left side of their brain is damaged, and because of that, their brain chooses to put movement in the right side, hence why they're left-handed. But that's not the case for all left-handed people. So why is not everyone right-handed then? DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, is what makes us up. It's the instructions to us. It's what gives us our hair color, eye color, skin color, and hand dominance. Did you know, if you have parents that are both right-handed, the chances their child will be left-handed are about 10%. But if one parent is left-handed, the chances increase to about 17%. So, if being left-handed is mostly genetics, then why is it a more rare trait to have? Well, to be honest, we don't really know. But we do have some guesses. Back in the Industrial Revolution, this was more common. Left-handed people would use machinery and equipment that was made for right-handed people, and because of that, they were forced to use their non-dominant hand. This led to less control over things, and sometimes using right-handed equipment that was dangerous, they would actually critically injure or kill themselves. And for a while, that's why left-handed people had a shorter lifespan. Psychology is complicated, and it always has been, and there's still a lot of questions we don't know the answer to. Everything I'm telling you in this video could be proven wrong in the next 10 years, but as of now, this is what we think is correct. So this leaves us with one last question. Do left-handed people have different personality traits, and are they more intelligent than right-handed people? Roger W Sperry was a famous psychologist in the 1960s. Back then in the 1960s, psychology was just first being studied, and before then it wasn't given any attention, so his discovery was very big news. Anyway, Roger W Sperry made the discovery of two minds. What this said was that one part of the brain controlled one side of the body, one part of the brain controlled the other side of the body. And then on top of that, it also said that one side of the brain, or one hemisphere, is responsible for one set of tasks, and the other part is responsible for another set of tasks. This is called hemispheric lateralization, and Roger W Sperry even got very successful over this discovery and even won a Nobel Prize in Psychology in 1981 because of this discovery. But was he right? Well, he was right in some areas, but in others he was wrong. Sperry was wrong because he believed that the brain had a dominant side, but as we discussed, we now know that isn't true. Another thing Sperry was wrong with was that he believed one hemisphere of the brain was responsible for one task at a time. He believed if you were for, say, writing, and writing was located on the left hemisphere, then the right hemisphere would typically just shut down. But we now know that isn't true. Both hemispheres do work together to do tasks, but one typically does more work than the other. But where he was right is his split brain diagram. I'm sure you've seen this before. What this states is that the left side of the brain is mainly for analytical, logical, and mathematical thinking. And the right side of the brain is imaginative, artistic, and for emotional thinking. So therefore, he thought that left-handed people were more emotional and imaginative, whereas right-handed people were better at math and were maybe better critical thinkers. But that's what he got wrong. If brain dominance doesn't exist, then why would that be true? Well, it's not. And this is a giant misconception. If you Google this on the internet, it will pop up, and as of now, we don't think it's true. But there's one last thing we haven't discussed yet, and that's ambidextrous and mixed-handed people. But it's not that complicated because all you know the basics. Being ambidextrous is primarily just genetics. Instead of prestigious movements like writing going to one side of the brain or the other side of the brain, it's typically split between the two. How does this happen? Mainly genetics, mainly by chance, mainly by some type of brain trauma, but it's primarily based on luck. Mixed-handed people are pretty much the same, just genetics. Mainly by chance, some parts of the brain prefer to do some tasks, other parts of the brain prefer to do other tasks. This is mainly by chance as well, and it's something you don't really have much control over. But before you leave, I do have some advice for you that I think could exercise your brain and make you a smarter person. One tip I had for you is to start writing and doing tasks with your non-dominant hand. It sounds crazy, and when you tried it earlier with me, you're probably thinking, well, that was super hard. Why would I do that? But that's the reason I think you should do it. One is patience. It takes a lot of patience to learn how to write with a non-dominant hand. It's hard, and it's hard to keep going because if you stop, you're going to lose the ability. But if you keep going, the end will be worth it. It's also good for the brain. As always, remember, the brain is a muscle. You need to exercise it in order for it to become more healthy and more developed. So do hard things with it and train both sides of your brain to write and do other tasks. That's my best advice. I tried this experiment on myself actually. I started 3 years ago and now I can fluently write with both hands. It's been very nice too as well. I don't think you should just be reliant on one side of your body to do tasks. I think you should try and do both. With that being said, this is Mind Matter. This is a YouTube channel I am currently trying to grow. Thank you for getting me to 50 subscribers so fast. If you're watching, I would appreciate a subscription to try and grow the channel. I do have other big videos ahead. And as always, thank you for watching.